Hello, class. Miss Roberts here, and today we're going to learn about argumentative fallacies. Now, my approach to teaching or talking about argumentative fallacies is to just kind of talk about them one by one. There's a lot of them out there. However, I want you to think about it like this. Have you ever been in an argument or had discourse or seen argument discourse and you were like, that doesn't make any sense? However, you couldn't pinpoint why. So when we're thinking about argumentative fallacies, we have these fallacies, or excuse me, these errors in reasoning, where it sounds kind of right, or it sounds like it's common sense, but there's something a little bit off about the logic. So the next time you have that feeling, now that you have known about argumentative fallacies, you'll have a name to those errors. Let's begin. So again, we're talking about argumentative fallacies, and a fallacy is just an error in reasoning. So when we think about reasoning and think about the building blocks of an argument, we we have our claim, we have our grounds evidence, we have our warrant, just coming together to make a complete argument. So it might be structurally valid, but not materially true. Let's go ahead and talk about different argumentative fallacies together. All right. So first we have ad populum. Have you ever did something and wanted to try something because everybody else wanted to do it, or everybody else was doing it or trying it? So an arguer is asserting that the claim is true because most people believe it's true. For example, people believe that hint water is the best alternative to soda, so it must be true. But that might not be the case. It might have a weird taste, or it might not be as healthy, or it might have too much sugar. Who knows? But just because everybody else is doing it, that doesn't mean it's the best course of action. Okay. Then we have ad hominem. And this is a common fallacy because in the heat of the moment, especially if it's a spirited debate or an argument, instead of talking about the issue at hand, they might start attacking the person. They might be in the middle and say, hey, well, I don't like your face, or I don't like the way you dress, or I don't like your attitude. But it's not talking about the problem, you're just attacking the person. So, hence, ad hominem is when an arguer attacks the person rather than responding to the position or claim. Why should I believe you? The other day you couldn't even open a bottle of ketchup. So unless the argument is about opening ketchup, you're just attacking the person. And as a person of the small hand brigade, those jars are really hard to open. So, just saying. Next, we have appeal to tradition. So traditions are wonderful. I love traditions, and I love, excuse me, I love doing things the old-fashioned way as well. But that doesn't mean just because we have always done something, that doesn't mean it should continue to be done. So when we appeal to tradition, it's used when the argument asserts that because something's always been done a certain way, it should continue to be done this way. So we always go on vacation in July, so we can go to vacation in July this year. Well, true, July is a really cool time to take a vacation, but what about December when it's the holidays, or maybe take a vacation in April? Who knows? But just because it's July, that doesn't mean that's the optimal time to take a vacation. And just because you've done it before, that doesn't mean you can't switch it up and do something new. Then we have a classic appeal to fear. Advertisers and politicians use this a lot. This is when the arguer supports a position by attempting to convince others that there will be some undesirable consequence or something bad, or something bad will happen if they don't. So, if, like I said before, many politicians use this. Like, if we elect this politician, the country will be ruined. Now, of course, there might be certain impacts, but I want to make sure that we don't heavily appeal to fear if we're trying to. It works in the short term, but in the long term, especially if that action doesn't come to pass, or for instance, you can only make somebody scared so much when they're just like, I don't care anymore. So appeal to fear can be effective, but you can't just lean on it, and you can't just use fallacies to make arguments. So there's that. And then there's also slippery slope. So that's if an arguer objects to something that's not necessarily because it's undesirable, but can lead to something else if it's undesirable. Like if you give a mouse a cookie and all this stuff will happen. And so in order for you to test the slippery slope, you have to take out one of the actions. And if you take out one of the actions that's leading to that undesirable result, it's a slippery slope. So for example, if the professor offers a curve on the test, then they will have to offer a curve on every remaining test in the course. Well, excuse me. Well, say for instance, if they don't recur a curve on every other test, then that's the one action that will break up the logic of that happening. So if you take out one action, you have to, excuse me, it might be indication of a slippery slope. If you do this, then this happens. This, like if you go outside when it's raining, you might slip, you might fall, then you might break your ankle, then you might not be able to go to that concert you wanted to go to, and you're gonna waste your money. You see what I'm saying? So if you take out one of those actions, then the whole argument falls apart. And then we have false dichotomy. That's when an arguer casts that's when an arguer casts an argument in either or terms when there are really multiple options. So if you're either for me or against me, that's a false dichotomy. It's not always black and white, but there are shades of gray. Then we have single clause, so the opposite. Um, there might be a more nuanced conversation, and one cause might not be adequate to talk about a more complex problem. So the popularity of TikTok is the cause of the declining use of Instagram. Maybe, but then there might be some things in Instagram that might not be as desirable anymore, or maybe people are taking social media break in general, and Instagram just might be one of the first casualties of that. Who knows, right? And then we have a hasty generalization. So that's when an arguer draws a broad conclusion about a category or population based on a small sample size or insufficient sample size. So my grandparents don't have small smartphones, so all old people must not have smartphones. And we know that's not true because, of course, define old, right? But then also, I know two people in their 80s that use their smartphones. And then I know younger people who decide, hey, I'm not using a smartphone because I don't want to be distracted with my phone anymore. So you want to make sure not to make generalizations based on a small sample size. Okay, what's over here? Okay, post hoc ergo propter hoc. That's a very long word, but that's when the arguer assumes that it becomes one thing happening to the other, then that must have been a result of the previous event or thing. So one of the arguments of someone anti-vax movement is like, okay, well, vaccines harm children, they might cause um, neurodiversity or neurodiverse, excuse me, or disorders such as autism or other things that might happen to the kid, and they might have this anecdotal experience where they know someone who vaccinated their kid and they were diagnosed with autism. So someone might say, I refuse to vaccinate my children because my friend's child was vaccinated and they're autistic. But research has shown that people are born with autism, autism runs in families, people are neurodiverse, and that's life, right? So just because someone was vaccinated before being diagnosed with autism, that doesn't mean that the vaccine caused that diagnosis. Excuse me. Now we have begging the question. So that's when the arguer essentially restates the claim as a reason for the claim. So people should obey the law because it's the law. And if it's the law, we should obey it because it's the law. We should obey because it's the law. We're law-abiding citizens, so we should obey the law. See? Circular reasoning. Red herring. So what's a red herring? So that's when an arguer introduces an irrelevant topic into debate to divert attention from the real issue. People do this all the time. It's not just about whataboutism, right? Like, what about this or what about that person? But what about what they're doing? What about this example that has nothing to do or vaguely has something to do with the topic at hand? So that's when the CEO distracts attention from a recent company layoff by redirecting the conversation to a flashy new product development. So, hey, we just laid off 5,000 employees, but buy this new smartphone. Um, okay. So that's probably one of the more common fallacies that we've seen or observed. Then there's the fallacy. Just because there's a fallacy, that doesn't mean the whole thing's a fallacy. So there's no divine line on what a fallacy is, but we have to think about the context. The conclusions can be true even if the argument presented is not logically sound. All right. Let's see. Okay. All right. So we have a guest appearance by my cat Katrina here. But thank you so much for joining me on talking about different fallacies. Now, this is not nearly an exhaustive list. I have a video where they talk about 31, but these are some like the main ones that we encounter. So the next time you hear an argument that doesn't make any sense, there might be one of the fallacies in there. But of course, let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and my cats. And I'll talk to you later. All right. Bye, everyone.